the realization of children's rights. So this is why we are here, to make sure that the realization of children's rights becomes a reality for the children themselves. Yeah, and one fundamental way of doing so is to ensure that social accountability is entrenched primarily in the civil society, who are one of the arms of government. Now, isn't there used to be three? Now I can safely argue to say the fourth arm of the state would be civil society and the media. So the reason why we are talking about issues of social media. So please, just say social media, of social accountability. Please, may all who are in attendance, can you just type your name and the organization that you are representing, so that we can just know who is here, and we have an opportunity for us to engage with Ms. Nhlanhla, to ask questions and also to share experiences. We know that you have been involved in some of this work also, so it would be great to hear your experiences in social accountability. Yeah. Yeah, great. I can see Save the Children Nisha is here, and Dr. Kimani, and Lepoto, and another colleague from UNICEF. Thank you so much for joining us. Musa also from SOS. You are welcome. So perhaps, Nhlanhla, you can proceed to introduce and the topic and the way you want to address it. Yeah, and Samu Mandiwana from Zimbabwe National Council for the Welfare of Children. Yeah, please, Nhlanhla, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy that you were able to make the time so that we can continue the conversation. So I'm not sure if I just go through what I had said, or if there were some specific questions that remained from the last session we had in May. Are there any specific questions that people wanted me to address, or should I just go ahead with what I planned?
Yeah, I think perhaps two things. If people have questions as you present, you can either type them here, colleagues, or you can ask for the floor from Nhlanhla. So if you're not speaking, please may you mute your mic so that any sounds that are in the background may not interfere with the presentation. Otherwise, yeah, please proceed, Nhlanhla.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I've tried to share the screen. I'm not sure if everybody can see it.
We can see it. We can see it.
You can see it?
Yes, I think we can. We can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and then we can, if there's a problem, we can always share it by email. Okay, thanks, Lipoto. Okay, so basically, we need to define what we mean by social accountability, because we know that if we talk about budget work, it's usually more about financial or budget accountability. But then the question is, how do we bring the community on board? Because we know that the language that governments use is usually confusing to ordinary citizens. And then we always see the need to basically break it down so that people can have an understanding of what is happening to government policy, to budget, to service implementation. But also, more importantly, we need to build the capacity of citizens to demand their rights from governments. So that's when we start talking about social accountability. Basically to say government must start to account to citizens and be able to provide answers to the questions that we as ordinary citizens are asking. So in this case, when we talk about budget accountability, it's more about saying, how can we get citizens involved in budget matters? We know a lot of people feel that they should not be involved in budget matters because they don't feel they are making enough contribution towards government budgets. But then people are not literate enough to understand that they are actually providing all the money that the government is spending looking at the taxes. And if we can look at the basics, we know that almost everybody is paying VAT, value added tax, and we believe that whoever pays VAT must demand a specific service from government, whether it is 1 cent or if it is $20,000 that they pay, but at the end they are funding government expenditure. So people must be able to demand. So now the question is, how do we make sure that people are able to come out and raise their voices to demand proper public service from the government? So the concept of social accountability basically is about making sure that the citizens, organizations,
Muted.
and even structures that represent citizens are able to engage with government so that government knows what people's needs are and is able to deliver on those needs, but more importantly, is able to report how far they've gone with meeting those needs. So that's how this social accountability concept has come about. And I think when it comes to budgets, it becomes even more important, because we know that the budget is the main government policy that we should be monitoring. As I indicated before, there are just many policies that governments are approving, and you find that those policies just are just there and they are not implementing them because of money matters. So budget accountability is important now, because we start asking questions among all the hundreds or thousands of policies that government has put in place. Which ones have been prioritized in terms of saying we are committing this money to make sure that this policy is implemented? So policies are not really meaningful without money. So we need the money to make sure that these policies are being implemented. So which policies are being funded? And the question that we need to ask, what informs government budget priorities? Why do they decide to put money on specific policies and not on other policies? And once they put in money in those policies, what process is in place to make sure that citizens make their voices about the quality of service, because we talk about availability of services, affordability of services, but even issues of access, because you might find that there are services which are available, but there are other problems with regard to access. So people might have challenges accessing the facility, the health facilities, or any other facility where they are supposed to get their services. So then we need to start asking questions to government and say, well, you have approved this policy, you have allocated money to it, and then you have procured the services. But are these services being accessed by the right people? And once people have accessed the services, is there a change in quality of life? Are people's health getting better? If we talk about education, what are the education outcomes? Are we getting the desired results, or we are just spending and wasting the money? So basically, social accountability is about saying, let's get the community to ask the right questions. So for people to ask the right questions, they need to have the right information. And more importantly, they need to have skills to be able to work with the information that is presented to them, so that we move beyond a stage where people get satisfied with government reports. We say we need to see government reports, but we need to engage with those reports to make sure that we make our meaningful participation in the processes. We are able to give government the right feedback that will hold them accountable. We don't want just to accept whatever is given to us. We need to engage with it and make sure that we have benefited what we were supposed to benefit as community members. So, so it's quite a mouthful in terms of what I've said now, but we need to break it down and say, so what tools can communities use to hold government accountable. And again, I need to emphasize this issue of transparency as well, because if we want government to account, there needs to be transparency in a way that government needs to share the information. There should be a space for citizens to engage with the information. And if the information is not enough, there should be a platform where communities come and say, well, this information is not enough. Please give us more information. But more importantly, in terms of finding out what are the results of all this that the government is doing. So how can we get communities to go out there and check if the services are provided and if the services are of the right quality? But also, given that we are talking about the rights, how can we put money on the rights? How can we ensure that children's rights are funded? And how do we see that there is sufficient funding for children's rights? So basically, it's about saying we need to analyze the policies, and then we also need to look at actual implementation of services, and then we need to go out there and see who is benefiting from government policy and from this budget. So in a way, we can have a picture of how of the effort that the government is making to achieve children's rights. So so in terms of the background, I'm now going to look at the specific tools that we have looked at before, but I will just pick on a few just to emphasize the ones that seem to have worked in many places, but also share what the changes have been based on the application of these tools. So the first one is community scorecards. As the name implies, basically we get the community to give a score of the quality of service provided. So here, basically, we put the community at the center stage and say, given all the efforts that the government have worked on in terms of policy making, of budgeting, of implementation, how does the community feel about all of this? And does the community feel that they are getting what they are entitled to due to government's constitution and all the human rights? So basically, communities are the ones that have to give a score to government and say, this is working, this is not working. But more importantly, if things are not working, be able to indicate what is it that is not working so that government can change it or government can fix it. So community scorecards are very important at the community level. Because it allows the local beneficiaries to assess the availability, the affordability, the accessibility of the services at the community level, and be able to give immediate feedback to the service providers. So here, the timing is very important as well, because communities need to give feedback at the right time so that they can change things. So we always say in budget advocacy, you need to intervene before the main decisions are made. So even with the communities, they need to make sure that they give their feedback before the decisions are made in terms of the changes that are required. So communities need to know what is involved in the project. They need to know what this project is supposed to provide to them in terms of transparency with regard to information access. But then they also need to know how the allocations were made for these services, because we don't want government just to give us pennies for the services that we are supposed to access. There should be a thorough budget process that tells government about the needs, but then more importantly, tell them about how these needs will be addressed. And then we look at the money as a facilitator of the whole process, because if there's no money, nothing can be achieved. So basically, looking at community scorecards, which is a very simple research exercise, and I believe anyone can do it even if they do not have resources. Usually, community scorecards are done by local community members, people who can walk to the facilities and check if the services are being provided according to specification. But also community members who can also talk to the service providers, be able to ask questions. So while they talk to service providers, they can also talk to beneficiaries themselves in terms of saying, what are your experiences? What are your attitudes? How do you feel about this? And within a week, a community scorecard can bring a big change in a community, because people can actually gather the data, analyze it, and then at the end of the week can have everybody to come and look at the reports. So we believe that community scorecards are quite powerful to bring a change at the community level. And they are the most cost-effective mechanism of getting communities involved in government processes. So there are many examples from different places. I know there are some good examples in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Kenya, and also Tanzania. But there's quite a lot of experiences from India as well. So it would be good, maybe if we can have time in the future, just to pull out some few cases of what the different places, so that people can see if they can maybe apply this in their work. But also looking at other tools that could be used together with community scorecards. Because I think it's quite important that we look at social accountability as a hybrid of different tools that can be used. Because where community scorecard work, there could be other things that could be used basically to enhance community scorecards and to make information more valid and more sound. Because I've indicated before that governments do not really recognize community scorecards as giving them good information, genuine scientific information. So they believe that since it's a community process, then it is not scientific enough. So sometimes a lot of findings from community scorecards are being discarded because they did not follow any scientific procedure. So now then it means if we want to have good quality information that different audiences can recognize, then we need to start looking at other tools that we can use as citizens, basically to generate the information that will push government to respond to us and to meet us halfway. So now the tool that I will want to jump to is the citizen report card, which is more of a scientific survey, because it forces us to follow the scientific procedures of research, starting with getting ethical approval from the ethics committees. So we know that if we do citizen report cards, we will be able to use the information in different or with different audiences, because the quality of information is guaranteed, that it is quite valid information, and it followed the scientific procedures that people want to hear about when you tell them about your research results. So there seems to be a problem with Nicholas Piri. Nicholas, can you hear me now? Hello, Nicholas?
I don't think he can hear you. I've given him a method that he can use to try and hear the audio.
Oh, okay,
so
all right.
We're trying it now.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so now I'm talking about citizen report cards, which are also referred to as satisfaction surveys. Satisfaction surveys are very important because they tell government if government is on the right track and if they are not on the right track as well. So basically it's about saying, are we satisfied with the delivery of the rights that government has promised us? But how do we break it down? Are we satisfied with the quality of services that are supposed to address some specific rights. For example, if we talk about the right to health, how do we monitor the right to health? We will monitor it by looking at health policies, health budgets, and then look at the implementation of the budgets. So how can we be sure that all these policies and budgets are giving us what we should be getting in terms of the right to health? So we again are always talking about the quality of service, because you might find that services are provided everywhere. People are accessing them, but then the question is it an acceptable quality of service? Because we believe that government money must be used in a way that will bring about desired change. And if the quality is not good, we know that there is not going to be change. Instead, our health might get worse. So we say, let us do thorough research to generate information that will tell us if government is doing the right thing or not. And this involves beneficiaries of services. And I think this is very important, because we could speculate on many things, but we need the real truth by talking to the people that are affected by issues. So basically, citizen report cards are scientific research projects that follow scientific procedure, starting with application for ethical approval. Because if you are going to involve human subjects, you are forced to have ethical approval for your research to be judged as of the right quality. So now citizen report cards have been used in different places. We've also used this in South Africa. Basically, designing scientific research projects involving large numbers of people, because if we want to be sure of the results, we need to make sure that our sample is big enough. So we need to make sure that we get as much input from different beneficiaries as possible, so that we can make our informed judgment. And the results will tell us if things are going according to plan, or things are not really happening in the right way. And then after that, we then create a platform to engage with government. So now, once the survey is done, a report has to be generated, and then it needs to be debated with government. But through that process, we also get beneficiaries themselves to tell of their experiences of accessing these services. So, for example, you might find that the results of the survey indicate that government has not done much in terms of providing these rights. But then when you get to a public hearing where people are invited to come and give their testimonies, you also find people saying, well, this project has worked for me. I've got some good stories to tell after accessing this program, and so forth. And then, so even though the results indicate that government has not done much, you can then hear of some pockets of successes where government has assisted in changing people's lives. But also, if it seems like the results are good, government has done so much, then you still need to have the public hearing where people will give their testimonies. And in these testimonies, you might find that people are not satisfied, they are not happy. So the report has excluded some people, maybe a minority number of people are not satisfied with the services. So even though the majority is satisfied, we still need to follow up and say, why 5% of the population is still not satisfied? What are these factors that are contributing to dissatisfaction? So we still need government to plan for action to make sure that everybody is satisfied of the services. So now the report that is generated can then follow, can be in different formats. So we could have a report that is simplified for community members. We can have a report for government and for other audiences, depending on who we want to reach with the report. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that there is a plan for action, so that this is not just a research report, but it's more pragmatic in a way that all the information in the report will be used to improve policy development or service delivery. So at the end of the day, you get everybody involved in the process, starting from beneficiaries of services, providers of services, and even policymakers themselves, who need to decide on policies and budgets, so that at the end of the day, people can be happy with what they are actually accessing. So that is the second tool that has been used. And now I want to look at the physical verification one, which is very simple. For example, if you talk about children's rights, so what does that mean? So we may be talking about the right to food, right to education, right to health, and all of these other rights that children need to have. But how can we understand what these rights entail? So now we need to basically understand the rights. We need to look at policies, analyze policies, but then look at the actual execution of these rights. Now, execution means there needs to be programs that are going to provide the rights to children. So one of the things that you can use basically is to use what is called physical verification, basically to go and see the places where children's rights are supposed to be provided. If we were interested in the right to education, we could go and assess the quality of schools and see if they meet the standards from the book of standards from the government. So we can physically see if the classes are of good quality. We can check if the windows are there. We can check if the books are there. We can even start counting if the books are enough for children enrolled in the school. So physical verification seems to be the easiest to do because you just need to walk in and use your eyes to see, and then also do some calculations as well. And this one is very important, especially in resource scarce settings, where people do not have money to do thorough research or to do things that are quite sophisticated for scientific research. So now physical verification gives us the power to go and see and to even take pictures that we can use to tell the stories. So for example, if we are looking at the right to health, and we know that there's supposed to be a pediatric unit at a hospital, we can actually go to the hospital and check if the pediatric unit is there, and check if they've got nurses that are providing the services, and also check if there is enough treatment for children in that unit. So we could do quite a lot of work without spending any money. So maybe we can pay for the taxi fare, but it's not expensive to do physical verification. But also it is not risky like other tools because you can verify without telling people that you are verifying something. You can just go there and observe how things are being done and if services are there, and then maybe also talk to a few people about why they are in the clinics and if they are getting what they need. So basically, physical verification is the simplest and most cost-effective tool that people can do. So this one has worked very well with infrastructural projects. So if you monitor public works, like building of schools, building of roads, building of clinics, and also expansion in existing facilities, you can easily check if things are being done. but also you can have pictures to tell the stories. So there are examples where physical verification has shown that governments are not doing enough. So before I shared an example of a bridge which was supposed to be built somewhere because the place was quite flooded. But now, after a few kids died in the flooding, people remember that the place was supposed to have a bridge. But nobody had ever bothered to go and check if the bridge was actually there. So when they did physical verification, they found that the bridge was not there, but all the money had been spent. And after spending the money, somebody had come in to issue an inspection certificate, which showed that the bridge was built according to the standard. But then at the end of the day, the money had gone to their private pockets. So this is quite important that we do it as well, just to have the physical feel of everything that we are monitoring. Sorry, was someone saying something? Hello?
No, I think it was just noise, or just background noise, I think. So you can continue.
Okay, all right.
If anyone has any questions for him, you can comment. If anyone has any comments or questions for him, please do let him know.
Okay. So basically, those are the three tools that I would recommend be used at a community level without imposing too much danger or risk to people that are doing the monitoring. Because they are quite easy to do. They can be done by community members themselves with some little training. But there are also other tools like procurement monitoring, which I indicated that it may be dangerous because it involves quite sensitive tender issues. And we know in many places where tenders are involved, there's quite a lot of fraud and corruption. And if you try to basically find out how much fraud has been conducted, you might even lose your life because people might even consider killing you. So it's not quite safe to do procurement monitoring, but it's very important to do. It's very important to do because it actually helps us to see how the spending decisions are made. So this one is based on a premise that most government money is spent through procurement. So the decisions of how the money will be spent will mainly be made through procurement processes. But then now, if procurement is the process that is going to be used to determine where the money is going to be spent, how can we get communities involved in that as well? So that at the end of the day, the money is spent on the right quality, but more cost effectively. So now looking at money matters as well and seeing if there is value for money. So procurement monitoring is very important to look for value for money, but also it is important to make sure that services are delivered on time at the right price. So the question is, can we get communities to get involved in those processes? The easy answer in Africa is no, because we know that there is quite a lot of red tape, especially in decisions around money. And then if communities wanted to be involved, it will take quite a lot of convincing for government to bring them in. But there are some good stories from the Philippines, where Procurement Watch Initiative, PWI, basically started procurement projects. And they use those small projects to show government that if procurement was being monitored, government would save a lot of money, but government would be able to provide services at a faster pace. So government was quite open and supported this idea of having procurement monitoring as one of the programs in government. So this organization was basically given the go ahead by government to monitor procurement procedures, which made it easy for them to access all the documents and also to engage with all the stakeholders. So the involvement of PWI actually helped in terms of making sure that the tender process was fast enough. Because in many cases, you find that service delivery is delayed because the tender process is slow, the tender board is not meeting, the people that are supposed to sign documents are nowhere to be found, and nobody is holding them accountable. So the involvement of PWI in the Philippines basically tried to push the processes to move faster, which then meant that the decisions were made at a faster pace. But then there was a thorough examination of the tender documents, basically to make sure that whoever got the tender was promising the right quality, but was going to cost less than anyone else. So basically making sure that they were paying what was of value for money in terms of making the right decisions and avoiding paying expensive tenders but not getting anything out of them. So procurement monitoring was good in that country because there was buy-in at the highest level of government. But in places where there's no government buy-in, I would say let us not even consider it because it would not be safe for those doing it, because it basically threatens the businesses or the business people that are benefiting from these government tenders illegally. So I think I would stop there now in terms of the tools, and then maybe just wait if there are any specific questions, then I can talk more to them.
Does anyone have a question?
I can say that Nicholas,
Yes.
not hear much at the beginning, but yeah, but just got a synopsis on social auditing.
Hello.
I have not spoken about social auditing. Maybe I can just quickly spend just 2 minutes on it.
Hello, I just wanted to ask you a question.
So social auditing is another tool that has been used in many places. I must say it's not an easy one because it requires that you've got all the government documents for you to make your assessment. So social auditing is different from financial auditing because it does not only look at the money, but it also looks at whether the people that were supposed to benefit from the programs did benefit from the programs, but also more importantly, how much money was spent towards that benefit. So social auditing looks at the community getting involved in the auditing of the projects. So this one is quite important. Let me just go to the slide, which differentiates social audits from financial audits. So social audits take place at the community level, basically having citizens conduct spot checks of implementation throughout the program. So we know government audits are done at the end of the financial year when all the money is gone. And usually the money will not be returned if there was fraud or corruption in government. So the social audits basically say, let us start auditing the program as it is being implemented so that we can make timely interventions. So we can basically conduct spot checks during implementation, and where things are not going all right, we can make our voice heard on the changes that need to happen. But it is also concerned with the results of spending. So we know with financial audits, government is concerned about financial controls in terms of whether the money was spent according to plan, without really looking at the results. But social audits are interested in the results. So basically saying the money was spent, but what is it that we got out of it? So what are the outputs and outcomes? So moving beyond just operational efficiency and saying, is there cost effectiveness? Is there a change that we can relate to this spending? So social audits are quite important to bring some meat into the bones and say, well, the money was spent, but these are the results of spending. And if there are no results, it also says there are no results, then someone must be held accountable for the money, because obviously the money went to someone's private pockets, which then means there was corruption and fraud. And then the community can use the social audit reports to demand the money to be paid back, because there is proof that the money was stolen. But as I've indicated, it is not safe because the documents might not be made available. The service providers might refuse to work with you if you want this, knowing that without the documents, there's nothing that you can do. Because for you to do the social audit, you need to look at the business plans, you need to look at the budget plans, you need to look at progress reports and all of those things. And if those documents are nowhere to be seen, you cannot make your good social audit. Okay, so now I'll stop there and then wait for questions. The presentation that I shared is quite full on all the tools, giving you the process in terms of how you go about doing something. Are there any questions?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Yes, Tipotso from UNICEF Lesotho. Hi.
Hi.
Yes, just wanted to thank you very much for a very simplified presentation. And
Okay.
one small question following the procurement monitoring bit. You mentioned all the good points about it, but also the risky parts of it as well.
Yes.
And so I was wondering then, who would be well placed to undertake this procurement monitoring bit? Because you mentioned that we do not recommend it for communities, yes, but then
Yes.
who would be more better placed to do that? Thank you.
Yes, that's an excellent question. Thank you. We have seen in many different governments units called procurement units, where governments say they want to start monitoring their procurement. But we know those units are not doing anything. So now the question is, how can we use the existing government systems to monitor procurement? But then also say at a high level, which national organizations or national NGOs can actively engage with government on procurement matters. So now basically we remove the risk from the community level to national organizations that are already working with governments. So at least if we get the national organizations or the bigger organizations to do this work, we basically reduce the risk on individuals at the community level. But also having the NGOs as outsiders to the community. It is safer than having locals doing the assessment, because as outsiders, we can come in, assess, and then also disappear or leave the community. But there are some other examples. I think for example, in Kenya, I think some Muhuri has tried to do some of the social audit work done by the national organization, but working with community-based organizations. But at the end of the day, it is a national intervention rather than a local one, because of trying to make sure that the locals are not being exposed to any danger.
Hello, Katha. I think there's some other questions in the text. Yvonne from Save the Children is asking if there are any effective tools for social accountability in humanitarian settings like South Sudan and Somalia.
Sorry, I can hardly hear you now, Pam, but I'll try and read what is written there.
Okay.
Okay, I see the question from Yvonne. Are there any effective tools for social accountability in humanitarian settings? I think there could be. I think the tools that I've mentioned could be used in humanitarian settings as well. For example, if we look at community scorecards, they can be used basically to monitor humanitarian aid and to see if people are actually getting what they are supposed to get or what has been promised to them. So people can basically sit down and plan around the project that is being implemented, and also see if those that were supposed to benefit from it actually benefited. And if people are not benefiting, they can easily find out what is blocking communities from accessing the humanitarian aid that is supposed to be given to them. So I think the tools that I've mentioned could be used for humanitarian aid monitoring as well. Oh, I said give an example of South Sudan and Somalia. Yeah, there. I remember in Sierra Leone, I was helping the groups there in terms of monitoring health budgets. But then, as we were busy with the health budget, there was this outbreak of Ebola. And then the strategy had to change because there was quite a lot of humanitarian support provided for Ebola victims and families. But what then they did basically was to do budget monitoring of the aid that was being brought in. But then they also started to look at community interventions that were being implemented to see if the money was being used according to need, but also to check who exactly was benefiting from this aid, because not everybody had been equally affected by Ebola, and some families did not need interventions while others needed quite a lot of interventions. So I think this could be used in humanitarian aid settings as well. Nicholas has asked about okay, very useful in instances where relevant documents are available and where there is cooperation from government. Yes, I agree, Nicholas. So where there is government buy-in and there is availability of documents, then social auditing becomes easy to do. Okay, there's a question from June. Where is the line drawn between CSOs supporting citizens to engage in social accountability and CSOs being seen as inciting communities? Wow, that's a good question, June. I think this question relates to another question that has been asked in terms of who raise community consciousness of the things that communities must be monitoring. So we get organizations coming in to assist citizens in terms of providing the training, the resources for community members themselves to monitor service delivery at community level. But then also, we also get communities that do not seem to own the processes. So now the question is in terms of ownership of the processes. Is this a community process, or is this process coming from this NGO coming with some agenda or some hidden agenda? So I think that's quite an important question to ask. And I don't think we have had answers to the question in terms of who raises community consciousness. Is it the community members themselves, or is it these inciting NGOs? So basically, who raises awareness before we even talk about developing these monitoring projects? So I think that's a good question to ask, and it's something that we can discuss in detail when we meet each other. I'm looking at the next one. Okay, I see, Lipotso, you talk about the HAP. I have not heard about that one. It would be very interesting if you could share on it. I'm looking at the next one from Nicholas. So Nicholas emphasizing that the issue of risk is the same both to communities and also to NGOs because of the shrinking civil space. So what could we do in such instances to promote accountability? That's a hard one, Nicholas. So we always talk about sustainability of these efforts, which means that if the NGOs are no longer there to sustain the efforts, somebody needs to be able to pick it up. That's why we emphasize that capacity building must be generalized at the community level, so that community members have got the skills, so that whoever was doing this work can basically continue doing it at the community level. But then if the work was done by outsiders, they should have left some skills behind, so that the few that are at the community level can continue doing it. But again, we'll need to look more carefully at the risk issues, because they do not go away, whether the projects are shrinking or expanding. So Lipoto is asking, do we have any child-friendly tools among these? We do not have tools specific to children, but these tools, I think what I like about the community monitoring tools is that they can apply in all issues, in all sectors.
Hello?
I believe we lost Nhlanhla for a second. Let's give him 1 second to rejoin us.
Hello?
Hello. Oh,
Hello?
yes.
Hello?
We can hear you. Yes.
Sorry, I see my internet seems to be going on and off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was talking to Lipoto's question about the child-friendly tools. So saying that I think these tools can be applied in different settings on different topics, but there should be some tools that are child-friendly, and I'll have to talk to my colleagues if there are any ones that have been used in different places. Okay. Are there any other questions?
I think Lipoto is also asking how we can work with the media in this space.
With the media. Okay. The media is very, very important, but also the media can be very dangerous. So it's important in a way that we can use it basically to expose government of things that are not happening or right. But we can also use the media to tell stories of change. If there is significant change that we should applaud government for, then we can also use the media for that purpose. But the media can be dangerous in a way that if they do not understand the language that we speak as civil society, they could basically dilute the messages and end up telling things that are not true, and that could actually impose quite a lot of risk on us as well. Because if we get journalists that are not telling the truth about what we have given them, then it's a risk, because we could be seen as people that are just causing havoc when things are going right. So we need to make sure that we train the media as well on these tools, and then we sit down with them and spend quite a lot of time to make them understand the results of our monitoring before they even go out there and start telling the stories on our behalf. Because we don't want them to tell stories that are not really true stories. We want to make sure that the stories are validated before they go out. So we need to basically build their capacity. We need to sensitize them on the issues that we work on, so that they get interest and then they see the value in telling the right truth, instead of just telling the story just for the sake of it. So I think we can work with the media, more importantly on the budget issues, because very few people have been interested in health budgets, for example. So the question is, how can we make these issues attractive enough or sexy enough for the journalists to follow on these ones and then to publish and follow through? So I think it becomes our responsibility to train them, to keep them interested, and more importantly, to keep generating the right information for them to be kept activated on the issues that we are working on. Pam, I'm not sure if there's any other question. My internet is slow, and then I'm not seeing any questions being fed into the system.
Yes, well, people are just generally agreeing with the issue of the media and how we need to be careful when communicating with the media.
Mm-hmm. So
there are a few more examples.
Oops, sorry, could you say that again?
There's a few more examples, people giving examples from Zambia and Zimbabwe of using the media.
Okay, all right. We also have some good examples, I think, from Botswana, from Bonella in Botswana, and also from Tanzania, as well as in Kenya. So basically, they have, in terms of their programs, they also provide training to media houses or to journalists on the issues that they work on. Then they do the research or the monitoring, and then they prepare reports, and then basically they invite the media for the media release or the press release. And then the stories is taken out, published, but then there's follow-on work where the journalists are actually invited to come back and look at progress reports. And then the media is able to show if there has been change since the first story was published, or if things are getting worse, and then start asking questions. of when is government going to take the right action to correct all the wrongs that are being published in the stories. So it's mainly about building the capacity of the media, keeping them interested by giving them the juices in the stories, but then also making sure that there is follow-on activities involving the journalists.
Thank you. There's a question from Yvonne. She's asking, what is the correlation between fair financing and development and social accountability? How do we ensure that we can hold government account for both allocation and appropriate spending?
I think this is one thing we should, because if we look at the policy making process, it's a long-winded process, starting from needs assessment, going on to strategic planning, to budgeting, to implementation, and all of the other processes. So in terms of monitoring, we say citizens must be involved. So this brings the issue of public participation. Citizens must participate in all phases of policy making, including budget making, because budgeting is still part of policy making. So the issue of budgeting and spending and accountability, I think it's something that we should just integrate into one activity that is basically rolled out throughout the financial year. Because as we are budgeting for future spending, we are currently spending on the current budget or on the budget that was approved last year, and then we want government to give us desired results, but more importantly, in terms of asking questions, how far are we meeting our targets? We need to make sure that we create the balance, or we monitor the balance between budgets and spending. So looking at efficiency issues, is the money that is allocated being spent? How much was spent? But more importantly, out of the spending, how much did we get in terms of the outputs and outcomes? So basically, it's the question that we have to ask all the time if we are concerned about holding government accountable.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, Nhlanhla, I just wanted to say that for the Lesotho team.
Yes. Yes, sorry, Lesotho team. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. There was quite a long break. Please, could you repeat again?
Yes, Musa and Pamela were here 2 weeks ago, and they presented aims, I think, social accountability, advocacy general, including this bit. Now, one of the issues we raised was that Lesotho government had just passed, I think that week or a week before, just a few days before their arrival, that they had just passed a budget. And we were at the point where, with now open eyes, how can we be specifically guided as CSOs to, so to speak, expertly analyze the budget? Because the truth is that we have missed the formulation step, the budget formulation. That's fine, but we still have opportunity at the analysis, the tracking, and the performance monitoring steps. So this is the specific asks from the Lesotho team. How do we proceed? And we have the budget in front of us, but how do we proceed with you to get to that point? Because we already seen some loopholes, but we just want to do it anyhow.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We could share the tools that we use for budget monitoring, But I think if you have not done it before, it will be good for you to go through maybe a 2 to 4 day training workshop on budget monitoring and expenditure tracking, because you need quite you need time basically to go through the tools and to understand how to use them. So we could maybe plan in terms of how we could provide the training to you, or we can share the guiding document in terms of you trying to figure out how to do it on your own. I'm not sure, but it's something that can be done. And given that you missed the formulation stage, now you need basically to look at the budget, but also to look at the past spending trends, just to see how much has been spent where and what are the results. But more importantly, is the budget progressive enough to continue providing the rights to the people? So you can look at past expenditures and also look at the current budget. And if there is information on costing, you can also check how sufficient the budget is. So looking at the current costs versus what has been allocated, what is the funding gap, and then what are the implications of that funding gap. So you could do that. We could share some tools, but then we can also be able to have an in-house training and basically provide the training to you if you have the resources.
Thanks for that.
Hello. Hello, Pam.
Yes, there are a few more questions here. There's a question from Henry. He's asking, do we have a compendium of standard generic thematic indicators for social accountability that can be simplified and shared with communities for their tracking?
Sorry, do we have the indicators of? Sorry, I could hardly hear you there again. It's breaking.
Oh, sorry. So do we have a compendium of standard generic thematic indicators for social accountabilities that can be simplified and shared with communities for their tracking?
I am not sure, but we do not have from my side, because we believe
Unmuted.
when the communities decide to engage on social accountability measures, they are the ones, they need to define their own indicators based on what they need. So I'm sure we could be able to source some information from different places that could guide this to happen, but I have not seen any where we could find the whole or all the indicators that communities could choose from.
Thanks. There's another question from Duma.
Sorry, Pam. Sorry, Pam.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry. Yes. Sorry. I will need to leave in about 9 minutes, if that is okay with everyone.
Okay, I think we can answer a couple more questions, and then that will be the end.
Yes.
So,
okay.
Duma's question. Duma is asking, how do we ensure that we create/develop a strong, sustainable relationship?
Sorry, develop a strong, sustainable relationship between who?
He doesn't say, but I'm going to assume it's the media.
Or with the media?
Can you confirm?
So how do we sustain relationships with the media?
Duma, are you there?
I mean government.
Or with government?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good question. You know, governments change all the time. We know that governments have got a specific term to serve, and then we get new governments, they go, and then sometimes we get new people. So now it's about saying, how can we make sure that we always have one foot in the government system, whether there is new leadership or if it's old people. So in terms of our approach, we basically believe that we need to spend quite a lot of time in terms of building relationships with government, because we know that without relationships, it is going to be very difficult to access information. So basically, we build relationships, and where necessary, we even talk about signing memorandums of understanding, so that even if a new government comes in, we can still show that we have got an arrangement with government to work on specific issues. So it's basically about building the relationships, but more importantly, in terms of knowing who's who in the zoo. So identifying the right people in government who are not likely to leave even if the political leadership changes. So we basically target the right program managers, the directors that are there on a permanent basis that we can continue working with, but also the people that are relevant to the policies that we are monitoring. So in terms of our advocacy, we say we spend 98% of our time figuring the right persons that we should be working with on an ongoing basis. And then the 2% goes to all the research, the monitoring, the community meetings, and all the other things that we do. So what is more important in sustaining relationships with government is basically to know who the right one or two persons are and get very close to them and basically develop a relationship which will be mutually beneficial, because they need to understand that what we do is basically also meant to enhance their work so that they can perform better. It's not about exposing them, but it's about enhancing their work. Then at the end of the day, that work will benefit the citizens who need the services.
Thank you, Gafa. Is there a final question? I think we can close it off. Thank you so much, Gala, for your time and for giving us this truly informative session. And thank you for everyone who attended and who joined us. Thank you for being with us. I will be sharing Gala's presentation and a recording of the webinar for anyone who wants to dive deeper or share with people who are unable to attend.
Okay, thank you very much, Pam. So I will share with you what we call the guidelines for community budget monitoring, which people can start to go through just to give them a picture of what is expected of them if they want to engage in budget advocacy. And then if people want more practical training, then we can talk about organizing workshops for those with trainings.
Thank you. And for anyone else who wasn't here earlier, could you please text through your name and your organization so that we may know who was in attendance? Thank you so much, Gafla.
Thank you so much, Pam. Thanks everyone for attending this webinar. It's been good. The questions have been very good. I hope we can continue the conversation at some other time.
Thank you. And anyone who needs his contacts, please get in touch with me and I will forward you his contacts so if you need trainings and further information on the topic.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.